Okay, hello. I want to start by saying that we're on the traditional unceded and stolen territories of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And we need to continue to understand the truth of the history of Indigenous people and chart a course towards reconciliation for ourselves and for our organization. Welcome to the Strong as Steel podcast. I think we're on episode 3 and really excited to be doing it. I will start by introducing myself. I'm Scott Lunny. I'm the director for District 3 of the Steelworkers. And with me here in the district office, I have...
Hi there, I'm Jayson Little. I'm a national staff rep.
Okay, and over to the online guests.
I'm Jeff Bromley. I'm the Wood Council Chair for the Steelworkers for the forest industry locals across Canada. And I'm coming in from the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa speaking peoples in Cranbrook, British Columbia.
I'm Katie Crane. I am, Financial Secretary of Local 1423 out of Kelowna. And it is the unceded traditional lands of the Okanagan Nation.
Awesome. So before we get started in talking about collective bargaining, which is what we're going to talk about today, I did just want to say we were recently at the Women of Steel conference, the International Women of Steel conference, and I was really pleased to see almost 60 delegates from District 3 and really participating and enjoying themselves and learning a lot. Other than a bit of illness, I think it was a successful conference, and I hope that none of the District 3 delegates came down with any kind of sickness from the conference. But really excited to see so many delegates from Western and Northern Canada at the International Women of Steel Conference. I did want to acknowledge, which happened a bit ago, the passing of our international president, Tom Conway. Tom had over 45 years of service to our union and was a well-renowned bargainer, strategist, leader. I actually got to meet Tom around 18 years ago when I was a new staff guy from a merged union in Canada, and Tom took a good hour or so to chat with me and as the international vice president and get to know me and give me some advice. And obviously in the last couple of years, I've had a lot of contact with Tom. It's sad his passing, and he will definitely be missed by our union. I also want to congratulate and say that we unanimously swore in Dave McCall, who is the vice president, as the president. So he's now the international president of our union. Replacing him, the board appointed Emil Ramirez, who's the director of District 11, to be the vice president of administration. And then replacing Emil on the international executive board is Kathy Drummond as the District 11 director, who is the first woman as a director on our international executive board, which only took 82 years, but that's progress in any event for our union, and we're in good hands and in good shape moving forward at the international level. Like I said, we're going to talk about bargaining, and so there's been lots of conversations about bargaining in the press, and people are saying year of the union and hot union summer and all that kind of stuff. And there's been some high profile bargaining and labor disputes. The federal public service, longshoremen, the auto workers have been bargaining. We had a big national steel car round of bargaining and labor dispute back east. And right now the Quebec public sector are embroiled in some difficult bargaining. In District 3 in Western and Northern Canada, our locals are constantly bargaining. There's bargaining going on every day. There's settlements every week. So we thought it would be good to have a few folks on who could talk about some recent bargaining that's taken place in our union in District 3 and in Northern and Western Canada. And so that's what we're going to do. So we didn't actually rehearse this, so I don't know who's going to go first. Maybe Katie can go first and tell us a little bit about the bargaining and the labor dispute that took place in her local that she recently resolved.
Do you just want me to ramble on, or do you have some specific questions?
You can ramble on a little bit at the start, and then we might ask some questions. I don't know. What do you think? What do you think? Sounds good? Yeah, sounds good.
It's probably not a good idea. That's when I tend to swear the most.
All right. There is no delay on this, so, what you say might be recorded.
That's fine. We started bargaining with Rockwool in Grand Forks, and just for people who don't know, Rockwool is a multinational corporation that produces insulation made out of rocks, hence the name Rockwool. It's actually a really amazing product, which if you ever buy any in your local hardware store is very expensive. They have two operations in Canada, one in Milton, Ontario. They're unionized, not through us. And the other is here in Grand Forks. And that's the one that we deal with. And so we started bargaining. I think we did a proposal exchange at the end of May. And bargained throughout June. There was a lot of delays on the company's side when it came to setting dates. They hired a consultant for the first time to help them with bargaining. I know Scott and Jeff are somewhat familiar with this fella. I did actually hear an HR manager from another company refer to him as the McDonald's of negotiating. So I thought that was pretty fitting.
Did you hear our eye rolls on that? We were rolling our eyes, both Jeff and I. So.
I don't know if the company will use them again, but so it was a pretty long process. There was a lot of feelings of disrespect in the sense that the employer, other than having dates set aside for June, had no other kind of inclination to set more time aside for bargaining. They offered, end of June, they offered some more dates in September, which didn't sit well with the crew, which is how we got the strike vote. Eventually managed to get some more dates. I'm trying to think. We did file 72-hour notice, I believe in July, and they filed for mediation. So we agreed to enter into mediation. Unfortunately, couldn't get anywhere with that. Did get a kind of final offer, but not official final offer through the board that we took to the crew. It got rejected, and shortly after that, we refiled 72-hour notice, and they went out in August 25th. And then they were on strike for 7 weeks. We eventually got an MOA that ratified October 14th. And so I think this is the second week that they've been back to work. So,
cool. Yeah. And they got a pretty good deal, I understand?
They had to be on strike for 7 weeks to get it. So it's a 3-year deal, 13% wage increases just on the wages over 3 years. So 6, 4, and 3. And they got a $4,000 signing bonus, which now we have some grievances filed on that. And some other increases to some of the premiums and things like that. And a lot of language improvements.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's great. I'm going to get Jason to talk a little bit about his bargaining at Rogers, and then get Jeff to talk a little bit about the forest industry bargaining, and then we'll have a bit more discussion about everyone's experiences. So maybe over to Jayson.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. So as I said when I introduced myself, I'm assigned out of the national office to national locals, which is generally federal regulated locals. So Rogers, TELUS, we have membership through those organizations. Recently, we came out of a TELUS round of bargaining, which took over 18 months, and it presented its own problems because it's a national local, whereas Rogers is a centralized mainly in the Lower Mainland, and it is primarily a group of craft folks, so technicians that go into people's homes, businesses, and they're responsible for the infrastructure that provides everything from your internet, your home phone, your television, even to your cellular devices. So this is the group I'm working with is a tenured group. They're very educated, very engaged. As we know, engagement is a key aspect to getting a good collective agreement. Some of the challenges that we've had to navigate through this was the Rogers-Shaw acquisition or merger, whatever we're calling it. So it did delay bargaining by a few months. And then once we finally got to the table, we had this history of and a relationship with Shaw, and then we had the unknown aspect with this new employer coming in. So we didn't know who was really navigating the conversation at the table, whether it was Shaw or Rogers. Ultimately, this group recognizes that there was two things that were the utmost importance: job security, navigating this new employer, and obviously wages or compensation. So we've been at the table now for quite a while. We have issued notice of job action as of 5 days ago. Our first initiation for job action was an overtime ban. So overtime would stop people from attending call-outs if there's outages after hours. We are meeting back at the table on this Wednesday, or coming up on November 1st, I should say. And we hope to get a deal done. The employers recognize the challenges that they have to overcome of a united membership, an educated membership, and a membership that is really, really emphatic that they would like job security with this new employer. They're the ones that have built and maintained this infrastructure for over a couple of decades, and those are the challenges that this new employer has to face in dealing with us.
Cool. Thanks, Jayson. Yeah, I think you're giving away that when we're recording this by throwing dates in there, but yeah.
Whoopsie.
So, anyway, Jeff, can you just give us a little bit of a update on where you're at in the BC forest industry bargaining?
A couple things first. So BC and Alberta actually has been, with the two operations, we have two large operations in Alberta. I'll start there in Local 1207 bargaining. We reached a deal up in the Tolkul High Level Mill, to a really large sawmill, about 330 members, earlier a couple of months ago. A good deal, about 13% over 5 years. So not a bad deal, but $4,000 up front. Positives, improvements on benefits, and improvements to things like boots and some good language that we've negotiated. All improvements, but we ran into a similar theme that I'll discuss as we move into BC bargaining, is that expectations of members are extremely high in the forest industry in the two jurisdictions, but it seems like the employer's done enough just to keep the members somewhat satisfied, but not enough where, in Katie's case, where her members were not satisfied with some good numbers and needed to go on strike to get more. And I found the opposite when push came to shove up in high level Alberta. Our members were right at the edge and didn't step off to go on strike. They decided to kind of hold their nose and ratify the MOA. The same thing happened to us, or is happening to us in Weyerhaeuser Drayton Valley last week, or 2 weeks ago, in fact, where the employer actually final offered us, and the locals decided to take it back to the members. A very similar deal to the Tokel operation. And then it's an exercise in jurisdictions, because in Alberta it's a little bit different in terms of trying to, you can't go, you got to go to mediation. There's cooling off periods. It's a little bit more of a song and dance under the labor code in Alberta than it is in BC, where things are a little bit easier to maneuver. In the forest industry in the interior of British Columbia, 5,000 members north and south, and their collective agreement was up June 30th of this year, and we've been bargaining since May of this year. And it's been really slow, and the employer has actually come to the table with concessions and actually is refusing. To this point, we've gone back and forth. They're refusing to table a wage offer. We've fully exchanged, and they've fully exchanged everything except for a wage offer. And so we've actually had to resort to legal options to try and force them to table a wage offer. It's like they're trying to just prolong it and prolong it and prolong it, and maybe that our members will either get sick of waiting or get frustrated, and it may be, because right now we're looking probably at the new year before we even get back to the table. We've got, in the way the structure is set up with the North and the South, they're two different entities, the associations that bargain for the employers. And then in the North, there's also 7 independent operations that we have to bargain them to the impasse the same way. I mean, so the plan is to try and get to every operation and every association at the same point of bargaining before taking different strategies, such as a strike vote or getting a mandate from the members. So a bit of a frustrating time in the BC side of things. Members have been pretty clear that their expectations are high, as all our members are across Western Canada, I think. But in terms of duration of collective agreement, the last 2 have been 5-year collective agreements in BC's forest industry, and the members were pretty clear that that was too long. And it was exemplified by the dizzying highs that we've seen for the lumber products during the last 5 years. During the pandemic, twice the prices for lumber went through the roof, and we haven't been able to capitalize on that leverage in bargaining when the commodity is that high. Right now, the lumber is kind of in the doldrums. There's been lots of downtime by a lot of the operations in the interior BC, and that's kind of spooked the members as well. And so it's really tough identifying our leverage points in the BC bargaining right now. So we're kind of just moving forward to see if we can at least force them to get to the table with our wage offer to see where we sit. But right now, it's pretty frustrating times in BC's interior forest industry.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I wanted to just ask a few questions, and y'all can ask each other questions too, to get the discussion going. But I just, Jayson mentioned that the employer knew that the members were solid and united. Katie, did you think the company expected your folks to, vote down a couple contract offers and go out on strike, or do you think it was a surprise to them?
I do think it was a surprise. Because let's face it, while we might in our bargaining get very good strike vote numbers, we know that the membership generally will give us those numbers as a bargaining chip, but if they actually have to go on strike, they won't do it, or they don't want to. And I think that the employer in Rockwool's case, I don't think that they were expecting it.
Yeah.
At all.
And were your folks that solid going in all the way, or did they kind of solidify based on how bargaining had gone and their feelings about the company's offer and behavior?
No, they were pretty solid like the whole way through. I have to give them all credit, and it wasn't just like those core senior guys that maybe are in a good financial position to be off work. Like, there was a lot in the junior and kind of middle seniority list that were like, F this, a lot of it. And I think the high expectations that Jeff mentioned, I think a lot of it is coming from what CPI was in the last couple of years. Like, and like nationally, the government, when they calculate the CPI, doesn't include things like fuel and groceries. However, if you look on the provincial, like BC government, they do calculate that. So the CPI for BC is actually slightly higher than what the federal government calculates. So if you're looking at like CPI of like 7% or whatever, like a 2% wage increase isn't enough anymore. And that's what the employees were seeing. And also in this particular industry, they were really busy, which is why they were so insulted by what the employer was offering. And they were really solid throughout.
Yeah, definitely.
Like there's some people that want to still be on strike right now. Like,
I was at the picket line, I don't know, a month in, and they were pretty solid. And that was a month into the dispute. So that definitely. And affordability for sure is one of the main issues, I think, across every bargaining table that we're at.
I think for this one, traditionally, like their numbers had been slightly lower in past bargaining because it's a small town and cost of living is usually cheaper. But, as everybody saw, like housing and even rent has gone up. And even in the small town like Grand Forks, like it's insane. I've looked at housing prices there and, you might as well be moving to Kelowna for what they're asking there.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you for saying F this and not spelling it out. Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd be curious, I guess, from our guests, some of the challenges that we've come across as far as engaging our members and keeping that solidarity rock solid. TELUS in its own thing is a national local, so it presents a geographical nightmare trying to engage people. People don't go into the factories anymore. They're either home dispatched or they work in remote sites and things like that. The Rogers group that we're bargaining right now, a lot of them, same thing, home dispatch. So they don't come to a central location anymore. And some of the things that we built our CAT team structures, our communication action team structures through the Building Power program. And we found a lot of successes in not only navigating some of the misconceptions about the bargaining process, but also using it as an engagement tool to build solidarity and keep people rock solid on the line. I'm just wondering if Jeff or Katie, you've had to deal with any similar challenges of keeping that solidarity, especially Katie, after 7 weeks of being out on strike.
Go ahead, Katie.
Yes and no. Luckily for me, it's one site, right? However, not everybody lives in Grand Forks. There are people who live in Midway or Greenwood or, that sort of thing. And so, like having the one benefit is because it is a small town, it's easier to get communication out there. We set up bargaining email information really early in the year before we even started bargaining. We send out surveys and stuff like that, and so people could join. And actually, through the strike, more and more people were sending in their email because that's how we get a lot of information out. And luckily for me, the bargaining committee, and I cannot credit them enough for what they did during the strike. They were there every single day. Every day. And we were running 24/7 picketing. And they were communicating with every crew every single day, letting them know, hey, nothing's happening. We have, the company, we're still waiting on the employer. So that kept a lot of it. Obviously, there's always going to be negative people, people who didn't want to be on strike in the first place. I give some of them huge credit because there were a number that I know that were quite honest. They didn't want to go on strike in the first place, but once they were there, any feedback I got from them was very positive. They weren't super negative, like they were a pleasure. And when I saw them, I thanked them all just for being positive and not like having that negativity. The most negativity that I got was actually from people who felt that the union was selling them out. We should have held out for 20% in the first year. Or one individual that actually accused the union of bargaining in bad faith. So that was fun. And it was all handled very well, I think, like I said, by the committee there. And I think about forest industry in our local, because we have a number of sites and they're all over the place. And, me having to be in Grand Forks, every weekend, every week, I couldn't do it every day. I can only imagine with the number of like forest industry sites. And I've already told Pat, our local president, that if forestry does go on strike, I will be checking myself into the hospital. I'm not dealing with it. Like one single site with 160 people is more than enough for me to deal with. I can do it with, 500-600 people on multiple areas.
Yeah, so that's a segue to you, Jeff. I know you got in the BC Interior Bargaining, you got 4 locals. And I don't know how many mills actually. I don't know if you know that off the top here, but it's dozens and dozens of mills that are covered by that bargaining. So that must be a real challenge for even just as you're bargaining, engaging with the members and communicating out to the membership.
Well, it's a massive challenge in terms of, and Katie, to your point, Katie, I thought you did a fantastic job, and so we're prepping for you in case we do need you if something happens. So you're going to be leading the way, just so FYI. So you're no checking into no hospitals yet.
Well, we're keeping the account open just in case.
Just in case.
Yeah.
But you're right, Scott, in terms of the dynamic from a standalone operation, about 165 members, so they're in the town that there are, or maybe just on a couple of adjoining towns. With the main table pattern bargaining that we do, or association bargaining with the BC interior industry, to your question, about 35 operations total, north and south, about just under 5,000 members. 4 locals, and like I said, there's 7 independent operations that are independent collective agreements, independent of the associations that represent the rest of them. And so communication is, we do a pretty good job. I think the locals do a pretty good job of maintaining their text alerts, their websites up, and communicating with their local chairs and through their executive boards and et cetera. I think the issue that we are faced with in the BC Interior, I think bluntly, we haven't been on strike in generations. Full of generations. And you'll remember this. I mean, I've been in the industry since 1994. That was some 8 years past the 1986 province-wide strike that was in the interior of BC, not to be confused with the coastal industry. The coastal industry has been on strike 3 times since that time. But the interior of BC, there hasn't been an interior-wide strike since 1986. So we have, I would say, a majority of our membership that is, I'm 54, so it's probably right around my age and younger, that have never been on strike. And that is, I mean, being on strike, as Katie can attest to, it's difficult and it's stressful to members. But if you've never done it, or if you don't have any connection to it, it is a completely new thing and important. And it's important to try and communicate that, that how we do it, or what works or what doesn't work. And it's extremely difficult in terms of our situation with the BC-wide forestry industry bargaining and the length it takes. Members get frustrated. Why is it taking so long? Why is it taking so long? Because what the industry does, they play a little silly bugger, and we're not available here, we're available there, and the 4 different entities tend to rag the puck a little bit, right? So it is certainly trying. I mean, we're going to make through it. We've made through it. On the flip side to that not being on strikes in '86, we've had 9 collective agreements, 10, maybe 10 actually, that we've been successful in and making good gains. But it is difficult when you're faced with what's our brothers and sisters in the coastal industry at Western Forest Products in 2019, when you're faced with concession bargaining like they were faced with, attacks on their pension, attacks on their contracting out language, et cetera. A 7.5-month strike is something that they've got lots of experience. They're battle tested, for lack of a better word, in membership. Our membership, we need to educate, and educate. If we get to that point. Now, do I see it come to that point? I don't think that we're going to be faced with concessions that's going to force our membership down a road, which I believe is an easier way to fight. I think it's going to be just a little, they're going to give us enough to maybe hold our nose and take it, but there are lots of members out there that want that their expectations are really high, and whether or not we're going to be able to meet them, those expectations is certainly difficult.
Yeah. The beauty of our structure is the members get to vote, right? So
yeah. And I should say that just for numbers, for our local, there are 7 certifications in forest industry.
In the interior bargaining. Okay, cool.
Just in our local
Yeah,
alone.
and there's 3 other locals, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one thing is communication is obviously a major component to engaging our members, and it's a fine balance. Everybody wants to know what's happening in the room, what's happening at the table, right? But there might be some strategy built around building engagement and messaging to the members, because obviously the employers will see our messages that we're sending to our members, right? One of the things that Local 1944 tried to do, and I strongly encourage any local, if they could afford it, is to pull off a full-time engager, one that can be in constant contact with the members through the CAT team structure and make phone calls for on behalf of the bargaining team if necessary, because Jeff and Katie, you're obviously very busy, and myself at the table. Dealing with members one-on-one could be a difficult or a tall task, but the tried and true is always talking to our members, engaging with them, because I think when you ask our members who's looking out for their best interests, obviously I don't think they're going to point to the employer, they're going to point to their union.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the questions I had too about out there bargaining, if like how the employers are approaching bargaining right now, because they know too that for the most part they've been making money. For the most part, their employees are falling behind. But you hear in Jeff's circumstance, they're actually asking for concessions, and in Katie's circumstance, they're it takes 7 weeks of a labor dispute for them to cough up a couple extra percent. Do you think that employers are prepared to bargain in these times, or do you think they're just kind of winging it?
I think they're all going to the same Bargaining 101 workshop, because there were things that came from the employer with Rockwool that I'm now hearing that the forest industry employers are saying, like the whole, until we deal with our issues, like you guys have too many things on the table, you need to take some of them off. We need to deal with X, Y, Z of our stuff before we talk about any of your stuff. I got the same thing months ago from Rockwool. They did the same thing. That was all like, man, union, you have too many things on your wish list, and we're not going to talk about them anymore, And it's like, just because you don't want to talk about them doesn't mean that we're going to like pull them off. So I think maybe they're like getting the same education recently. We'll just see how forest industry goes.
Yeah, I know your consultant does training, so maybe they've been going to his training in Kelowna or wherever it is. I don't know what your experience is, Jason. I know you do some other bargaining other than 1944 as well.
Yeah, so generally employers like the tit for tat approach. We'll give you this and you give us that. I don't think there's a cost for job security, and right now the labor market being the way it is, people like to have the stability of a good paying job that provides decent benefits. And that's what, unions obviously strive for with their members. With this Rogers bargaining that we're in particular, they're coming after long established jurisdictional language that would erode the job security of our members. And our members just know that is of the utmost importance, and they just won't stand for it. So I think employers are behaving in the ways that they always have, but I think what's surprising them is that the public outcry over this, and you're seeing it right across the country with unions and members standing up en masse. They're tired of these corporations reaping these huge, massive profits off the backs of our members. They're just sick of it now, and they're not going to stand for it. If there's a piece of the pie, it should be shared with the members and the workers right across, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in. The time to do that, I think, is now. People are sick and tired of it.
I was going to go around and say, did anyone have any like closing comments as we wrap up? But I think that was Jason. So maybe Jeff, do you got anything else you want to say?
Just to your point about whether or not the employers, the approach they're taking, I think it's a concerted approach, as Katie mentioned, but they're also doing, stuff like, I think they're hurting themselves. We're in the forest industry in particular. I know it's across a lot of industries, but we're having trouble attracting folks to keep and stay, retain these folks and keeping them in the industry. And some of the concessions that we're faced with in the North, they're going after tried and true language that was negotiated in 1958 about accepting layoffs or if you're in a bumping situation or bumping like a choice, and some real good language that we've had in our collective agreements for decades and decades. In the South, it's going after scheduling, alternate shifting, and they want the ability to just plunk in this shift, give you 2 weeks notice and say, by the way, you're on 7 on, 7 off, or whatever the case may be. And in the South, we have some good language that controls that. And so that, and I keep referring to them saying, listen, you have trouble attracting folks to your industry, to the mills to work in the first place, making them work weekends all the time or making them work goofy schedules, stuff where they can't be part of their community. They're away from their families and stuff like that is not conducive to attracting folks into our industry. And so I think they're biting off their nose to spite their face sometimes in terms of this approach. But because I know that in the mills, we're running bare bones. Our members we're shorthanded all the time, and they're just not seeing enough to improve that. And so, to your point, Jason, we're faced with the same sort of concessions. Long-standing approach to a tax on language has been around and worked, but they want something. They want more, right?
Okay, cautiously, I asked Katie if you have any last comments.
See, I've been doing okay so far. I haven't dropped any F-bombs that I can recall. I would say that, yes, I think there's a theme. It's definitely profits over people. I think that people or workers are tired of it. I think what's helping give that kind of empowerment to workers everywhere, it doesn't matter what sector, whether union or non-union, is the fact that there are jobs everywhere right now. And so these employers that, yeah, sure, the mills, Rockwool, good paying jobs with benefits and stuff, but why do you want to do that and not be valued as an employee when you can just go somewhere else because other people are hiring and it's maybe less stress? So that's where I think companies these corporations really need to think a little bit more. And if they, instead of just doing the lip service of we value our employees, and I think Tolko was like family values as part of their mission statement, don't spout all of this bullshit and then not actually do what you say. So that's where people are getting sick and tired of it. That's where you're seeing more solidarity. That's where you're seeing people saying, no, we'll go on strike and we'll be on a picket line. And until people figure it out and the employer takes us seriously and, sorry that, instead of, the 300 billion annual profit, you might make 250 because you might have to give your employees something. I will say that trying to do a ratification on an MOA when, the auto industry gets a 10% in the first year wasn't helpful for our September ratification vote that failed. That was the same day that they announced it, the auto industry one with Ford, I think. So that kind of sunk it, but it was a good learning experience, I have to say. I don't wish job action on anyone, but there were a number of things that I learned, and I will start putting together a manual to help out like my successors in our local, because unfortunately we haven't, in our local, hadn't been on strike in probably 15 years. So there's nobody in my office that had actively like been a BA during job action. So yeah,
that's great. Oh, that's a good idea to prepare your successor. Okay, any more extra last words?
Solidarity works.
Yeah.
It always does.
For sure. Okay, so we're going to wrap up. Oh, sorry, I got to look over here. We're going to wrap up. I just wanted to thank the three of you for joining us today, Jason, Katie, and Jeff. But also thank you for what you do, and what you've been doing, helping our members and leading bargaining teams and working to get our members good collective agreements. I forgot at the start to acknowledge our technical folks. We got Tyler and Dave behind there, I think, and Brett Barden, who are helping us put all this together. And sorry for not acknowledging you at the front, doing a good job. And also, this is our November podcast, and I should have acknowledged our veterans. Remembrance Day is this month. Please take the time to acknowledge our veterans. And if you are a steelworker who is a veteran, please come forward and participate in Veterans of Steel. At our last international convention, we made Veterans of Steel committees a mandatory committee for every local union. We've got a group at the district, a quite active group at the district that's been meeting and doing Veterans of Steel stuff. I did want to do one thing, so I don't know if this will work. I'm putting a toque on that is from USW 1944 toque, and that is because we kind of stole their podcast name. They started like a little bit of an upstart podcast a couple of years ago, and they had one really good episode, right? That Jason and I were on, and I was reminded that we stole their name. It wasn't trademarked, but Strong as Steel was what they called their podcast. So I just wanted to shout out homage to 1944 and the original Strong as Steel podcast. Please, if this is your first time listening or watching, thank you, and I hope you enjoyed it. And come again to the Strong as Steel podcast. If you're a repeat listener, thank you very much. Bring a friend next time. We're not quite trending, but we're working on it. And follow us on social media, USW District 3 on X, Instagram, and Facebook. And if you have questions, we may start taking questions and answering some questions on the podcast moving forward. So I think comms, like COMMS at USW.ca. D3 comms. Okay. Sorry. D3 comms at USW.ca. And you can give us some questions, and we'll try and answer them on a future podcast, or comments or feedback. Positive feedback only. So again, thanks everyone for joining us on the Strong as Steel podcast, and we'll see you next time.